how can I echo and support this program in my classroom or my program? We get this question a lot for all of our programs. Teachers and administrators want to know, what can I do to really bring this full circle so that I'm echoing the supports that you're offering families? And we love this question because when we're talking about maximizing the benefits of family partnership, when we're talking about supporting families impacted by trauma, we're going to be even more effective if we're all working together, if we're introducing strategies and then using them at home and also at school. So here are some ways you can introduce and enforce some of those strategies. For one, or for starters, you can echo our approach. We have spent a lot of time today talking about that approach to creating this program, the work of vetting the content through a trauma-informed lens, writing with accessibility and ease in mind so as not to activate a stress response, making sure we're setting up the right amount of scaffolding so that families can be successful with our activities and strategies, using strength-based language, translating and doing cultural versioning and scouring for anything that might be triggering or activating. These are all things that we do essentially so that our content feels doable, repeatable, and empowering. And there are so many ways that you can mirror this approach within your classroom and your programs. So to start, one thing you can do is to look at your classroom or program through what we might call a trauma-sensitive lens. So even before you know about individual families' needs and experiences, you can make some pretty good guesses about how to be welcoming, how to be accessible, and how to be strength-based so as not to activate a stress response in your students and families. You might ask yourself, what can I do to communicate to my families, this is a place for you. You can feel comfortable here. Some things you can do to achieve that: translate all your communications into families' home language. When writing to families, take that strength-based approach, position them as the experts on their child. Make sure your communications are easy to read. As I mentioned, we target a 3rd grade reading level. We include images, we include taglines, all of these to help increase comprehension. And you can do this too. These are things that actually can be done right off the bat. Every time you email, call, or text, it is an opportunity to build trust and comfort, no matter what you are emailing or texting about. You can also make some pretty good guesses about things that might be overwhelming to students and families so that you can avoid these things. For example, everyone knows that it feels overwhelming to be told there's this really important thing you need to do and not have the tools and resources or information to do that thing. A great example is if you're going to ask families to check the classroom blog and you're going to tell them this is so important, you have to also ask yourself, do they have a computer? Do they know how to sign on? These are exactly the moments where families can be activated, right? It can be very stressful. So make sure you're providing the necessary scaffolds and supports for families to be able to do the things you're asking them to do. You can also make some pretty good guesses as you're setting up your space. We know that lots on the walls can be overwhelming to trauma-impacted individuals. Loud noises can be activating too. For some children, it might be triggering or activating to sit with a back facing a window. So maybe you can make holistic changes to your classroom to account for these, but even if you can't, can you create a space or a corner of your classroom where kids might go if they're feeling overwhelmed? And make sure families feel represented within the fabric of your classroom. This might lead you to include signs in different languages or images of all different families and cultures as you communicate with families, also making sure that you have a diverse selection of books in your classroom library. Now, those were some general things you might do even before you meet your students. But when it comes to responding to them as individuals, which is important to any trauma-informed classroom, parents and caregivers play such a critical role in helping you gain a much more complete picture on how to help a child feel safe, secure, and supported in the classroom. So on our end, we're messaging parents and caregivers on how important it is to be involved. We're letting them know that insights they have on their child and how their child learns is key to helping teachers create supportive learning environments and address their students' needs. You can be reaching out on this too. So consider asking parents and caregivers questions that will give you insights into how their children learn best and into things that make it hard for them to learn. And we've put 2 up on screen, which you might consider including in an early email right towards the start of the year, right? I'll just read them aloud. Just like at home, children experience lots of emotions at school. What are some ways we might be able to tell if your child is feeling excited? What are some ways we might be able to tell if your child is feeling upset or anxious? And you might follow with, all students learn differently. Are there people, places, or things that help your child to focus and learn? How about things that help them to feel confident and strong? So you'll notice there's a lot of language in both of these questions, really normalizing big feelings, right? Everybody has them. So tell us more about how we can tell if your child is having them. And again, it's really critical to translate those messages and also be prepared on the other end to be able to translate back their responses. In our time together, we also talked a lot about the skills and strategies that we're messaging parents and caregivers on, right? We're giving them ways to help children self-regulate, talk about emotions, navigate those harder moments. These are all strategies you can use in your classroom, and everyone wins when you do, because the more kids use these strategies in all the places they go, the more practice they have with things like, deep breathing and naming a feeling, the better they'll be at utilizing those strategies in stressful moments. I mean, we can all take deep breaths when we are calm and relaxed, right? The trick is doing it when we're really stressed. So, practice those breathing strategies. You might have kids take 3 deep breaths every time they sit down at their desk. Just make it a habit. We're messaging families about doing this before they sit down to the table. We're also messaging them about doing it before they leave the house for the day. So imagine if they had, throughout every place they go, these touch points where they're just breathing. We also give families physical ways to help kids remain calm. For example, here's a great physical activity you can try at school. It's called push, pull, shake. So they push down on their chair with their hands. I wish I was in a chair and you could see me. And then they pull up and then they shake their hands to let it out. These simple physicalizations really help kids navigate out of a stress response. And you might also consider working in some centering activities or mindfulness moments that help kids orient in the moment, right? They're stressed, they're spiraling, and you ask them to name 5 things they see around them. Whew, they're back in the moment. They're back in the classroom. Again, these are all things that we're messaging families on at home. And then I'll also just say, we've talked about this. A lot of work we're doing in this program is building children's emotional awareness and capacity to notice and express how they're feeling. Because we know this statistic is amazing, right? Just by naming a feeling, that feeling becomes more manageable. And also because we want kids, especially those impacted by trauma, to have words to talk about how they're feeling. We want, especially those children, to have a wide emotional vocabulary. So consider using books as springboards. As you're doing a read aloud, pause and say, how's he feeling? And have you ever felt like that? Also, if you've got a word wall going in your classroom, consider making a little section of it all about feelings. Put up a feelings word wall and consider really looking for nuanced feeling words, because we know, right? Like happy is not the same as excited, and excited is not the same as thrilled, and thrilled is not the same as ecstatic. We want kids to have that range of vocabulary so that they can really accurately describe to you and the rest of the world how they are feeling. Also, we know kids can't always describe how they're feeling. So we'd recommend something like desktop feeling faces. We do a lot of feeling faces with families. You might just, in a little printout, put those feeling faces, and everyone gets their own copy for their desks, so that when you come up to a child who's having a stress response, you can say, can you point to the face that shows me how you're feeling, right? That allows a child who's not as comfortable sharing to tell you and communicate how they're feeling. Also, check in about emotions. Do it at the start of the day. Do it as the day ends. We're doing it at home with families, right? We want children to feel they have permission to talk about their feelings, that when they share about feelings with a grown-up, someone's going to listen. And this is all something we can be building in every area of a child's life.
Such great ideas, Rebecca. We also build parent-facing skills in our trauma-informed program. And a big one is their ability to reflect, right? To reflect on how their child is feeling, to reflect on what's working in their own parenting, to reflect on how their child's behaviors are affected by things happening around them, by their feelings. Because we want everyone thinking about how their own mental state affects their behavior and their choices, right? If we can get parents doing this, the next time their child has a meltdown, they're more likely to pause and wonder before they respond, right? They're going to think, what might be going on in this moment for my child? What might they be feeling and experiencing? And based on that, parents are going to wonder, what might they need from me in this moment? So here are things that you might do to build reflective practices with your families. And really, they're all around getting families in a routine of reflection. So you might try sending home a reflection question in students' communication folders or adding it to your classroom newsletter, really encouraging parents and caregivers to think about how school or homework is going. You can call it something fun like questions to think about or the question corner. And make sure families know that just thinking about the answer to the question is enough. But if they feel like sharing, they are welcome to as well. And these types of questions can get added to specific assignments. So say you're sending home some reading work, you might ask the question, has your child completes this reading? Notice, did the passage seem easy, just right, or too hard? What made you think this? You can try a weekly question too. So something like, this week, notice when your child does something well, how do they respond? And then the following week, just flip-flop it. This week, notice when your child feels challenged by something, how do they respond? When we encourage parents and caregivers to observe and think about their child's learning, it builds understanding and it builds connection, right? It feels empowering and can help parents really realize their own resourcefulness and expertise. And this really, getting families in a routine of reflection also helps make parent-teacher conferences even more supportive and effective, right? Giving parents a few questions to think about before the conference, like, what does your child seem to enjoy the most about school? What type of assignments seem the most fun or challenging for your child? And let these questions start the conference. When parents and caregivers get to share their thoughts, it communicates to them that their experiences, their expertise about their child is both respected and valued. And teachers, you get insight into how kids think and feel and perform when they are not in your classroom. And the conference really becomes this moment of shared conversation about the child, which is a win-win for everyone. So, and then I am the resource person around here. And so you'll hear me talk about connecting families to resources again, but you can connect families with resources because it's such a critical protective factor, right? When families have that need for food, for shelter, for healthcare, they need to be met before they can navigate other challenging and difficult moments. So you can look for moments of existing family interaction to share resources with families. So what does this look like? Right? Invite community-based organizations to attend in-person workshops or school functions to share about their services. When you add a CBO to an already existing event, it makes it even easier for families to find out about services available to them. It also can remove some of those feelings that families might have about seeking support because it's right there. And the same organization can also submit flyers to be sent home with students as well. Conferences, I go back to conferences, they are another great moment to connect with families about the support and resources they need. Sometimes simply asking, is there anything you need, can be enough to get families communicating about their needs. Other families might need resources but feel uncomfortable sharing that. So simply offering a resource handout of local support organizations that families can browse through before, after, or while they're waiting for a conference can really help normalize seeking out support systems. And then we can also take an inspiration from the community school model that offers wraparound services based on the needs of students and families. Honing in on the top 1 or 2 needs of the families in your school is a great place to start. Is it access to food, after school childcare, housing support? And then building partnerships with organizations in your community that support these top needs can go a long way in getting their supports into the hands of families who need them the most. And one more thing to think about is that you might actually need to scaffold the reaching out process too, right? When a family is in need, they are already experiencing a really high level of stress. Reaching out for help and successfully getting what you need can be challenging. So this is the main reason we created this resource that is all about accessing resources. So when families know what to expect and feel prepared, they'll be able to achieve the outcome they need. This is hands down one of our most valuable resources. So we'll actually be including a downloadable copy in both English and Spanish in our follow-up materials. So you'll get that for your families. And remember, families' needs can change. Offering resources consistently and repeatedly throughout the year ensures that families will have access to something they need when they need it. And something else in our parent-facing content that is a really well-received and receives a lot of great feedback from parents and caregivers is our messaging around self-care, right? It's all the messaging that reminds parents that meeting their own needs powers their parenting, reminders to carve out time for themselves to do something they enjoy, simple things like listening to a favorite song or reading a book or calling a friend. Really honing in on those easy, doable things that can make people feel strong, happy, and healthy. So what are some ways to share elements of self-care with the families you serve? Well, you can share delightful moments with families. I still remember the 2-sentence email I received from one of my son's teachers letting me know that he had helped a fellow classmate without being asked. I felt so proud. Those 2 sentences literally made my week. So noticing the funny, kind, and smart things that kids do in your classroom, and then sharing them with families will power their parenting, and families will feel more connected too. Offering hands-on homework is another great way to incorporate these self-care elements. Things like a worksheet card game offers opportunities for parents and kids to connect and play together. And we know that playing and feeling connected feels good. Maybe you're doing a science unit on plants. Giving an assignment for families to go outside and collect leaves is, yes, science homework, but it is also creating opportunities for families to experience things that we know boost mental health, like spending time together and getting outside. So as you assign homework, look for moments to shift assignments to things that boost happiness and connection. And I'm going to really double down on the self-care aspect of getting outside. Something that research tells us and that we integrate into our own messaging is encouraging parents and caregivers to spend time outside noticing or experiencing nature. Spending time in nature or even viewing nature scenes, provided the person feels safe, reduces anger and stress while increasing positive feelings. So you can try planning your next family event outside. So, and lastly, community connection is a form of self-care. So creating opportunities for families to congregate and socialize at school does this. Fun ideas can include a game night or after school sponsored recess. This is a great one. So in elementary school, the PTA in one my kids went to, the PTA hosted an after school or weekend recess, which was really letting families know, hey, a bunch of us are going to be at the playground. Everyone come and play on this day and time. A few members of the PTA volunteered to be in charge. Families hung out and talked. It gave lots of families who might have had difficult schedules the opportunity to meet and get to know members of the school community.